Deconstruction. I like to show this building here. This is a building. Let's look at some buildings by Frank Gehry, who's a really prominent architect right now. Um, Las Vegas got lucky and had wanted a Gehry building, and finally he built the Lou Revo Center here in town. And that was kind of a fantastic addition to our city architecturally, that we had a Frank Gehry building. Now, if I show you this building here, and I ask you, what's unique about this building, this architecture, that someone can say, well, parts of this look like just a standard building, but then other parts of the building look like the surfaces are curved, and it's almost as if one building is just classical, it's what we expect, and then the other is everything that we don't expect a building to be, that the walls somehow are cattywampus and go every different way. So that is a kind of deconstruction. He's given us something that we didn't expect to be there. And deconstruction is a tool. It is the prime tool used by a post-structuralist mind to challenge, change, enhance, and adapt the meaning. And often, like Goldilocks, what we want to adapt is something that is a traditional meaning that we often think, everybody thinks of this way, let's now push it this way. In the same way that Matthew Bourne took Swan Lake and said, don't look at it the way it's always been looked at. Let's see Swan Lake different, through a different lens, in a different way, in a much more masculine way, with a male and male relationship, and let's see it. Let's see the world differently and challenge it. Now, if we look at what is a deconstruction? Deconstruction is usually a process, and I like to say that it involves adding something or subtracting something, and often what is added or subtracted is an unusual element. So in the same way that Matthew Bourne gave you a substitution for where you expected women to play the swans, he gave you men. That's a kind of classic deconstruction. He's made an addition and a subtraction, or a substitution. So sometimes also we mix things. The mixing of opposite things is a good counterpoint that happens. The counterpoint in materials, sometimes things like old, where you want something that's old, you get something that's new. Where you want something that's good, you get something that's bad. Where you want something that's rich, you get something that's poor. So some of the examples, you'll see that valuable and disposable, that those two things come against each other. So I like that sense of saying the opposites, because oftentimes going to the extreme opposite makes us say, whoa, what happened to Swan Lake? This is so different. And then we can say, this is fantastic. I've never looked at this piece in this way before. So that's the idea really of this deconstruction. And we're going to look at lots of little deconstructions here and what they mean. But the biggest thing, I think, if you asked why, is to take the text and see something different. Maybe something deeper even, that we can see a deeper meaning, that if we're using the similar formula or the same way of always reading it, we're not going to see Goldilocks any differently. We're just going to always see her as this way. Rather than when I challenge you to say, what's Goldilocks doing in this situation? And is she a delinquent? Is she promiscuous? It's suddenly like, whoa, that's a different Goldilocks than we've thought about in the way. That's the postmodern Goldilocks idea. So it's a process that's used by these post-structuralists that moves us into a postmodern world. It challenges us to see the world completely differently. If I show you this canvas here, this is a great example of, and I say, what is unique about this? And then I might even ask the question of, what's the deconstruction? So what's unique about this is simply that the canvas is gone. All that's left is the frame of the canvas and just that jagged edge. So when we think about a painting, we think that what the surface of the painting is the most important thing. And instead, what this artist has done is taken that away. So perhaps the most important spot, the middle of the painting, is gone. So that's a challenge to say, what is a painting? And now we're seeing it differently. Now, some people look at works like this and say, oh, that's fantastic. That's great. I love that. I love that idea of, let's just light it on fire and see, what it is. And some of you could say Duchamp is that same kind of idea. Well, we expect a sculpture and then we have a urinal. That's a great deconstruction where we expected something extraordinary and we got the most ordinary thing there as the sculpture. So again, that's cool and fantastic. I found these. This is by an artist, Amit Shimoni, and he painted these where he took these political figures and he just contemporized them. So here we have Obama with dreads, in a tank top. And we have Trump here in this Hawaiian shirt with flamingos on it. And then we have Putin and Hillary Clinton and Nelson Mandela. So it's just a fantastic take on looking at these figures differently. Here's a visual artist who's a performance artist, and she makes her drawings, but they're about movement. And in some ways, she's kind of a human spirograph where she is just moving with chalk on the floor, on the canvas, and creating this drawing while people watch. So in a sense, the performance that performance art tends to move us. Like the doing of this shows us a part that we typically don't see someone making the work. But here we're seeing someone make it, and we're also seeing something different about it, where she herself is the mechanism for the making of it, in that space that she is making the marks on the canvas. So again, that's a kind of deconstruction of getting something that we didn't expect. Here's a closer view, and it's kind of beautiful. Many of you might look at this and think, oh, that would be a great dance kind of work. And again, she probably has dance training and likes that. Rudy Perez sitting and smoking a cigarette, also a deconstruction. And again, where we expected dance movements, we deconstruct and we get the smoking of a cigarette in that space. This is quite fun. I wish these were everywhere. This is a bus stop in Montreal where we typically expect people to sit on a bench and just wait for the bus. Instead, they get to swing. So they're not waiting, they're swinging. So that's a kind of deconstruction of the whole thing also. Here's another deconstruction that this is not a real picture, but this is an imagined picture of someone saying, what if I built a house at the Grand Canyon and it hung over into the canyon so that if you were sleeping in your bedroom, it would seem as if you were floating just in air on the canyon. Maybe they could even make it with a glass floor. That would probably even push it forward. But again, this person is changing the story, changing what we feel about what this space is. So rather than a bedroom being a private, enclosed space, this is a wide open space that's floating and floating amidst nature. I love things like this. This is an artist who went around town and on every crosswalk put the little guy in a tutu, and we assume it's a male. So again, where we got this little bit of a gender bend here, where it pushed it to look at the story differently, that maybe this is a dancer crossing, which is great. And maybe we're all dancers rather, and we should think of ourselves differently instead of just as pedestrians in the world. So anyway, I love the story and I love the challenge that simple little tutu gives to this way of reading this image. Now, look closely at this. This is an artist. He does a lot of work online, and he got kind of popular, I think, on Facebook because he's an artist that does all this body painting. This parrot is actually a human figure. The tail is actually a single leg. The other leg is kind of up, kind of in passe-ish, even higher than passe. The arm is over the face, painted, so that here we get this image. And he will do that where it looks like an actual bird, and then suddenly the bird will move and you'll realize it's a human body. So again, this is a kind of deconstruction. What's also fun about things like this is they're temporary. So as a kind of art where we expect some things to be more permanent visually, that here he's working with something that's very temporal and will disappear and go away as it's washed away. So it's a kind of filmed thing, and so it's again, it's a challenge. It's a different kind of art form than the traditional form in the traditional way. Okay, I love this, and I love examples like this because this is an artist. She works a lot in watercolor, and this is her tattoo of her arm. So rather than get this very graphically designed tattoo, she wanted the tattoo to look like her watercolor, what the watercolor board looks like that she deals with all the time, and just the mixing of colors together. So it's just an abstract, and again, it challenges us to see the world differently and to say, wow, that is the most unique tattoo I've seen. It's completely different than the other realm of what everyone is marking their bodies with. This is an upside down house. And again, the deconstruction is, can we build a house upside down? And that can be fun. I don't know if these are real or not, but they're, I think they're not real, but they're kinds of deconstructions of, looking at the world completely differently and seeing the world completely differently. Now, I sometimes, when I'm talking about deconstructions, I like to show something like this because this is Martha Graham's Cave of the Heart. Yeah, very classic story. She's telling the story of Medea, and when Medea finds out that her husband has cheated, and it's just a classic story, of betrayal and revenge. So this is a very modernist world where we read the story in a very particular way. All of the female roles are played by female. The male is a very classic male idea of a man. And we even look at this and we see that this is a very modernism, structuralist way of looking at this world. And that's very different than this image of Matthew Bourne's Swan Lake, where we see a very different way of telling a classic story. Yeah. So those are quite fun to really look at. This was a piece. Doris Salcido did this work at the Tate Modern. The Tate Modern has what's called the Turbine Hall. Tate Modern is in a building that used to be an old energy plant. And so where the turbines were, it was called Turbine Hall, and it's now such a huge space. So she was given the whole space to transform. And what she decided to do was to crack the floor. And this piece was called Shibboleth, but everyone called it the crack in the floor. And it started out as a minute little crack. And eventually the crack became this channel in the floor. It was beautifully, I think, cracked with the floor. And people would walk, sometimes people would trip and fall in it as they're looking around the turbine hall, and the floor has this huge crack in it. Some of it went down kind of 3 feet too. So it was, I thought it was a little bit dangerous, but good for St. Mater for going for it and doing it. But it was beautifully done, how it was cracked. And if someone asked me, what's the deconstruction here? I would say, well, typically people put art in the room, but they don't destroy the room in this way. The foundation of the building, they crack it to show us something else. So it really challenged what a piece was. I'm showing you some other images of Shibboleth also. Here's another deconstruction. This is a person who puts her point shoes on and just takes pictures in various places with her point shoes. And again, it's not what you expect in the subway to have someone on point. You expect the ballerina to just look kind of ballerina-esque, dancer-esque, but just in her ordinary pedestrian. But instead, we have this elevated view of this person. So here's a picture. Sometimes when we get into this post-structuralist, you have people who challenge the world and move it in directions that sometimes the world doesn't want to even move into, and they find art in places we don't typically find art. Damien Hirst here is famous for his shark, which we'll look at when we get to our chapter on value. But here you have a sheep in formaldehyde. And so this is a challenge, because most people don't think we don't expect art to be made out of something that was once alive in that way. That we can actually see this. To some people, when he first started making some of these pieces, they said, this looks like taxidermy, it looks like science, it doesn't look like art. But he became quite known for these works. This is Andy Goldsworthy, who also will do all of these pieces that are rather ephemeral. Like here, he has gone to this place and collected all of these sticks and created this sculpture. His work tends to be really beautifully placed and done, but all of it will disappear. It's ephemeral. It won't last forever, and it's just kind of finding kind of beauty in the world and creating this temporary beauty rather than works of art and sculptures that just continue and last. What these post-structuralist thoughts, these deconstructed ideas, and this postmodern art does is it lets us find art in different places. And some of these places were ordinary places, and some of it is places we didn't expect to find the art. And it's assembled in different ways with different contexts and different meanings. And all of it rejects that meta grand narrative idea that here's the way we should look at the world and look at this overarching concept. But instead, let's look at it multiple ways, and let's disrupt the way we look at the world, and let's see it differently. So I find that to be fantastic. This video has gone on a long time, so I'm going to pause here. We'll come back with some more examples.